As a kid, it's really easy to lose yourself in horses, to let them consume you to the point that nearly every school project is somehow about horses. Even though your teacher explicitly told you this time don't do horses, you still somehow manage to work horses into that school project. They basically become your entire identity to the point that every weekday is spent at the barn and nearly every weekend is a horse show, a clinic, a lesson, a rally. You basically become the living embodiment of that eat, sleep, ride sweatshirt that nearly every pony club kid had. You know, one day you're 13 spending every day at the barn lost in horses, and suddenly the next you're 18 getting ready for that next chapter in life and thinking to yourself how you're not going to become one of those women who's in her 40s and 50s and looks longingly at the girls that still have horses and remembers a time when she had horses. She used to ride all the time, and yet somehow she hasn't ridden a horse in 15 years. And it's really easy at 18 to say that that's not going to be you. To say you'll always have horses, you're always going to ride, and you're always going to show, and you're never going to lose that passion, that drive. But you get busy with college. And then you blink, and you're 21, and you haven't been to an event in 3 years. You've been kind of aimless in your riding, and you think, maybe if I just get back out to a show, I can recapture that excitement and drive, and I can get myself back on track. And the only thing left to do in this instance is to find a recognized event near you, because that's where you left off, and your pride definitely won't let you start back off at a schooling show. And the next step is to pick what level you're going to do, so naturally, you pick the level you left off on, despite the fact that you haven't trained anywhere near that level in the last 2.5, 3 years. That doesn't really factor into your decision, because you got something to prove. You go through all the motions you remember doing as a kid, and even though it's at a venue you've never been to, in a different state from where you grew up in, you do it. You show up. You have kind of a weird whiplash moment when you realize that you recognize none of the names on the entry list when you used to recognize them all back home. All right, I mean, it's not good, but you don't fall off. Yet somehow, you walk away feeling dejected and kind of isolated and definitely lonely, because it didn't feel like it did when you were a kid. Instead, it felt kind of empty. You pack up, you go home, and you let things just kind of fizzle out. I mean, you got college classes and a degree to finish, plus a job, and you find yourself riding maybe once a week, and that goes on for a few years. Your horse gets older, your mentality shifts to thinking that maybe all that head shaking and crow hopping your horse used to do might not be because she's quirky, it might have been because she's been in pain this whole time, and you make the harsh realization that perhaps none of your saddles ever fit. So, you put riding on the sidelines, even more, which is somewhat impressive considering you were hardly riding before, but your horse's health comes first, and it only takes you a few months to realize that as she enters her 20s, both her body and mind are happier not being ridden, and for her, retirement is the right choice. So where does that leave you? You're not done riding quite yet, and you start thinking that maybe it's time to bring on a youngster. Bring on a young horse, you know? You're 26, you've learned and unlearned a lot of things. You can do better now than you could as a teen. Hell, maybe you could even go to a show again. And so, with a grown-up job in your back pocket and a mortgage under your belt, you got a new horse. You also run a marathon because you're having a midlife crisis over accomplishing nothing, but hey, that could just be me. You take things slow with your new horse because you're determined to do it right this time, but you also take things slow because you're not always motivated and you work full time, so you really don't have the time. And all that motivation you seem to have starts to wane because you're busy. The weather sucks and you don't seem to be making much progress, but that could be because you're busy. So you do the only thing that makes sense, which is to wait for the new year to roll around and make a bunch of goals and resolutions in order to get yourself back. Back to where? I don't really know. You're determined. You're gonna get yourself back somewhere. You rewatch all of the old Jet Eventings YouTube videos that bring back the nostalgia of childhood and remind you of the excitement of what it used to feel like when you would go to competitions and shows as a kid. And 3 months into your new year, you sign up for a schooling show. You pick the lowest level possible just to have fun, because we're not making the same mistake we did last time. Pride can suck it this time around. And it goes horrifically awry. It's here, in the aftermath, you come to the conclusion that for the foreseeable future, you don't want to show anymore. You're never going to get that feeling, that nostalgia back from childhood that you've kind of been chasing. Your own mindset and training approach has changed so much that the showing atmosphere and environment isn't as enjoyable. And yet, giving up that aspiration to get back to a show one day leaves you feeling kind of aimless. Because it's always been at the back of your mind, whether you acknowledge it or not. And you're always seeing everyone else going to lessons and shows still, that letting go of this aspiration is kind of weird. And it feels like you're losing a part of that passion. I mean, don't get me wrong, the passion for horses is still there in full force. The question is just, what do I do with this passion now? And how do I do it ethically? I guess I'm entering my era of simply enjoying my horses, whatever that may look like. The problem is I have no idea what that looks like.